In this section we'll focus on heifer live weight and growth and the effect on reproductive performance of heifers. Heifer live weight is something that's really important on farms. If for whatever reason the live weight of heifers is inadequate, it will affect their reproductive performance as maiden heifers. It will also have consequences for the rest of their life. If they're skinny at their first mating and first calving, then their reproductive performance as first calf heifers will be compromised. And if you compromise their first pregnancy and their second pregnancy, their lifetime reproductive performance is often compromised, and also from a dairy farm point of view, their lifetime milk production will be less. So it's very important that farmers monitor the live weights of their heifers throughout their lives and try to ensure that they reach the right mating weight at the right time, and then once they're pregnant that they achieve the appropriate calving weight. Otherwise it will cost them economically, both reproductively and economically, for the rest of their lives. Heifers that are not in good body condition or at the appropriate weight at the time of mating may not be cycling, so they may be anestrous, and so you may get reduced fertility. Heifers that are in poor body condition at the time of calving, they'll produce less milk, and they'll also take longer to cycle, or that is ovulate, after calving, and so that will delay their conception. Heifers that are late to conceive will be at greater risk of being culled or having being subjected to calving induction, and they're more likely to have shorter lactations simply because they're not getting pregnant at the right time. So the overall message is the penalties for poorly grown heifers are severe and have implications for many years, and these same principles also apply to beef cows. So just to reiterate some of the important points for heifers that don't reach adequate live weights at critical points in their lives. At the time of their first calving, if heifers are at the right stage of body weight at the time of calving, they'll have a higher lifetime milk production, they'll have better reproductive performance, they'll calve more easily, so they're less likely to have calving difficulties, and they'll stay in the herd longer, so they'll have longer longevity within the herd. There are some graphs that are available online. This is available through Dairy Australia. Just go online, look up Dairy Australia, what's called the InCalf website, and it'll provide you with target weights for heifers of different estimated adult weights. So if you've got a heifer that your aim is to have her at 550 kilos when she's 24 months of age, which is the green line, then she'll be mated somewhere around 15 months, and the target weight will be somewhere between about 325 kilos at 15 months of age at first mating for that heifer. If you've got a heifer who's the particular breed or genotype that you've got, you're aiming for a 700 kilogram animal at the time of calving, then at 15 months that animal needs to be about 400 kilos in body weight. So farmers can weigh heifers every few months and just make sure that they're on track for the appropriate body weight that they should be for their stage of development. This is a graph that's available for Jersey heifers. Again, you read it the same way, but you'll notice that Jerseys are smaller than Holstein Friesians. So for example, at 15 months the heaviest adult mature weight Jersey only needs to be about 300 kilos at the time of mating. If you want to see some other resources for information on managing live weights in heifers, there's a number of websites that you can go to. I'm not going to go through them, but they're just provided as a resource if you want to read up more about this topic. Now some farmers don't have scales to weigh heifers, and so here's some graphs that give you target wither heights for Friesian and Jersey heifers in Queensland. So what you can do is just measure them, their height at the wither, and this will give you what the appropriate height should be for that age. So at 15 months of age, it should be about approximately 125 centimetres to the height of the wither in Friesian heifers. This just shows you that there's a good relationship between live weight and wither height. So if you don't have a set of scales, you can always measure the height of the withers above the ground, and that'll give you a reasonably accurate estimate of their weight. These are just some average rules of thumbs for target breeding weights for heifers. For British breeds such as Angus or Friesians, etc., you should aim for about 65% of an adult mature weight at the time of mating. For Bos Indicus and Continental breeds which are later maturing, you want them to be about 70% of their adult mature weight at the time of breeding. For most breeds, this is ballpark is between 300 and 350 kilos at the time of first mating. Jerseys tend to be can be a little bit lighter than that. As I mentioned earlier, if farmers can regularly weigh the heifers, then they can detect if they're below what they should be, and they can strategically supplement them with some extra feed if necessary. Sometimes you can draft off those heifers that are not reaching their weight goals and feed them preferentially. For example, you might have 100 heifers, but it may only be a group of 25 that need to be fed a bit extra. So it's no point feeding the whole 125, just feed the ones that are below target. So you can maintain them as a separate group. These are just some rules of thumb from the InCalf website. For some people, that they find these things easier to remember. I don't expect you to remember them, but they're just there for reference. Again, this is just reference that you can provide to farmers, for dairy farmers, that they can use to try to estimate what the target weight should be for the particular age at which the animal might be at. This is just looking at some performance characteristics of heifers based on their pre-calving live weights. So heifers that calve in light body condition, the 3-week submission rate, the percentage that are submitted for AI within 3 weeks of the breeding season, is less than animals that are heavier at the time of calving. Look at the conception rates to first AI. They're highest for heifers that are heavier in body condition at the time of calving. And the 6-week in calf rate, the percentage that get pregnant within 6 weeks of the start of the mating season, is generally highest for the animals that are heavier at the time of calving. For beef heifers, here are some different breeds of beef heifers. You can see critical mating weights for a range of breeds. If you look at the Brahman, most of them will be cycling if they're more than 340 kilos. So this becomes your target breeding weight for Brahman heifers if you can get them. You'll notice in the British breeds such as Angus, they'll cycle at a much lighter body weight, and so you've got a lower average body weight target for those breeds of animals. And then you can see how we get into the European and continental breeds. They're later maturing, and so you want a heavier animal at the time of first mating. Here's some of the management recommendations for if you want to select beef heifers to try to improve reproductive performance in beef heifers. The first thing is really to have most of the heifers reach their critical mating weights at the start of joining. Always mate more heifers than you need as replacements by at least 25%, and that allows you then to select the animals that you want in your future herd. When you're managing for target weights, don't forget to include some lighter animals in your breeding group, because if these get pregnant and they happen to get pregnant early, they'll probably be earlier maturing animals. That is, they'll reach puberty at an earlier age and an earlier body weight. And genetically this might be an advantage for you. So you can select those animals even though they're what you would call a lighter framed animal. But they're early maturing, and that could be a genetic advantage for your herd. When you pregnancy test the herd, if you, rather than just say whether the cows are pregnant or not, if you can age the pregnancies, then you can select those animals that are going to calve the earliest and perhaps sell the others that might be calving too late for your herd. When you're making selection decisions, base it primarily on fetal aging and temperament. If you've got surplus animals, once you've done that, then you can select them on other traits. And don't forget to select your bulls based on their performance characteristics, because 50% of your genetics comes through your bull, and a lot of the improvement for growth, marbling, fertility comes through the bull. So make sure you adequately provide enough rigour when you're selecting bulls to make sure that the estimated breeding values for the things that you want are high. Just be careful if you're crossbreeding. If you've excess hybrid vigour can sometimes produce calves which are actually too big for the breed that is acting as the dam. So if you think, oh well, I'll get extra growth rate etc. by crossbreeding, then just be careful, because your calves may be too big and you may end up with dystocia problems, that is, difficulty having the cows having the calves unassisted. I just want to mention this briefly because you may hear about it. It's not something that's done a lot. It's just a thing that's done perhaps a little bit more in the United States, and it's called reproductive tract scores in heifers. What this means is that there is a system for when you palpate the heifers to actually score the tracts prior to mating. Heifers that have got very small reproductive tracts and small ovaries are unlikely to be pubertal or cycling, and so you can not include these in the breeding group. It's based on a score system, on a 1 to 5 score system, where score 1 is a very small infantile reproductive tract, and a score 5 is a larger reproductive tract. The heifers reach puberty and there's a corpus luteum present, meaning that they're cycling. And we find, not surprisingly, that pregnancy rates progressively increase with increasing reproductive tract scores. So if you've got a mixture of heifers prior to mating, some have reproductive tract scores of 1, some have reproductive tract scores of 5. The ones with the higher score are more likely to get in calf earlier than the ones with the small tracts, particularly if they're not ovulating. This technique requires you to palpate the animals, so there's some extra cost involved in doing that. Most of the time, most farmers can get similar information from just collecting body weights and making decisions based on body weights. So it's not generally necessary to do this. But if you do happen to be involved in assessing herds and working with groups of heifers, if you know that a lot of those heifers have very small infantile tracts, then there's probably going to be not very many animals cycling, and pregnancy rates are likely to be poor. So for example, if you get into synchronizing estrus and doing artificial insemination, if you look at the heifers prior to starting and they're in low body condition, below average body weights, and they've got infantile tracts, the farmer's not likely to do very well from the AI program. This is just outlining some of the descriptions for the reproductive tract score system that's used by some. And if you're looking at heifers a couple of months out from the breeding season, at least half of them should have reproductive tract scores of 4 or 5 or more. I don't expect you to know this, apart from the fact that the principle that the size of the reproductive tract can be an indicator of whether heifers are pubertal or not, and it can also reflect what their reproductive performance may be during the breeding season. So again, have a think about some of these questions and pause the tape, and then we'll try and give you some answers. Okay, managing live weights of heifers is critical for optimising pregnancy rates in mating heifers. If heifer live weights are inadequate, particularly at the time of mating, then less of the heifers will be ovulating, and this will reduce reproductive performance. So they're likely to be late conceiving, and this will make them late calving. At the time of calving, if their weights are inadequate again, they haven't reached their target calving weights, then this will increase the calving to conception interval. It will decrease the amount of milk they produce in their first lactation. It'll delay the onset of cyclicity following calving, and these will all have negative impacts on reproductive performance. The other thing that we noticed, which I forgot to mention, was if heifers have reached adequate body weight prior to mating, then they may have undergone 2, 3 or more estrus cycles prior to the start of the mating period. And we know that in cattle and some other species, that if animals have had 2 or 3 estrus cycles prior to mating, that fertility will be higher than if they've only had 1 estrus cycle prior to mating. How does live weights of maiden heifers affect their lifetime productivity? Well, if you've got inadequate live weight at the time of mating and calving, then this will delay calving to conception intervals. That'll make them late calving. They're less likely to have a 12-month intercalving interval. It's likely to be shorter. Their lactation length is likely to be shorter. In the case of beef cows, the calf that's weaned is likely to be smaller. So this is going to reduce lifetime milk production and lifetime beef production in the case of beef cows. Once they calve late, they'll have less time to recover before the start of mating in the following season, which means that again they're going to have a delayed conception in the following season. So you can see if once they're late to start with, it's very hard over the course of their life to bring them backwards and to have them calve at the appropriate time. So this will compromise their lifetime productivity. What strategies could you use in beef heifers to improve reproductive performance? I guess the number one strategy is to make sure that they reach their target live weights and calving weights and don't lose too much body condition score following calving. Again, going back to previous lectures, you could strategically wean to make sure that you preserve body condition score in those heifers following calving. You can also mate extra heifers in the maiden group, and we talked about 25% extra heifers, and you can select those heifers that get in calf earliest, and therefore they'll calve the earliest and have more time to recover. You can also include some heifers in that mating group that perhaps haven't reached their target weights, because if these get in calf early, they're likely to have some genetic advantage to getting in calf early and cycling early postpartum. That's early onset of puberty, and so that might be a genetic trait that might be advantageous to you. We mentioned in a previous lecture as well that you can mate them a couple of weeks ahead of the cow herd, so that they've got a couple of extra weeks to recover following calving, so that they're more likely to be ovulating when you want to breed them. Here's just a question where I've given you a graph and I've asked you to work out what the recommended live weight at 15 months of age for heifers, for Holstein Friesian heifers with an adult mature weight of 600 kilos at 24 months of age. So 600 kilos, let's find that. That's the brownish line, 600 kilos at 24 months. And at 15 months they should be around 350 kilos. So the answer should be C. So this question is really just testing whether you can apply the information to this graph and extract the correct mating weight.